WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. If you're watching out on our YouTube channel, if you're listening to our podcast, if you see some things, you see my Coon shirt. You know, Dennis Colatzos is here from 3 until 5 each and every Thursday, driving home with the Dennis Colatzos Show. Luke Jones joins him. He joins me. He'll be out in Owens Mills all week long doing some Ravens reports. All those brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. And the last plug I have this week, and I have to apologize to all my friends out there from the Maryland Lottery, let yourself play, because we are doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I feel like I'm in a confessional here. Bless me, Luke. It has been 3 weeks since I've had my last crab cake. I'm going to have crab cakes on Thursday at Silver Spring Mining Company with my friend Gary Rissling, who was in the first locker room the first time I ever had a press pass with the Death Dogs down at the then Baltimore Civic Center, now the Royal Farms Arena. We're going to be out at Silver Spring Mining Company with Councilman David Marks, amongst others. I hope my friend Kevin Benson from Rosedale Federal will stop by as well. Got some other friends, but whoever doesn't join me Thursday can join me Friday at the Chop Tank down in Fells Point. Yes, I'm going to have the crab cake, but I like the fried chicken there too. Talking about Royal Farms, I'm non-denominational about great fried chicken too. So I'm going to be down at the Chop Tank. I'm going to get some crab soup because it's feeling a little hearty. Weather's turned a little bit this week. Luke, I don't think it's going to snow this Sunday like it did last time. You know, every time we see the Vikings, my wife gets this big smile and she thinks about the snowman and the Vikings game and she lights up. And anytime we talk about, Ravens winning the Super Bowl in New Orleans and the lights going out and Jimmy Smith and Ford. No. Jacoby Jones. No. The most fun we all had was the Vikings game, if you were there. And that was a wild one. Hard to believe it's been 8 years. I watched them play on Sunday night. We watched the league unfold on bye week. We're going to get to some Ravens specific stuff for bye week and the Vikings, but a bye weekend where we watch football and watch all the Patrick Mahomes struggle on Monday nights and watch all the Ben Roethlisbergers beat up the Baker Mayfields who's trying to motivate the Cleveland crowd. But the backdrop of the football, Luke, for me, was the owners' meetings last week. And I know the sausage in the NFL, but we're from Baltimore. I think we see it a little differently. I certainly see it differently when I start finding myself hating on Carson Wentz and the Colts again because they're the Colts and I'm from Baltimore. But, boy, the league had a really, really filthy week. I mean, as filthy as it could ever be if Congress is saying pass along the emails, kids, and you have to answer that. And then they go out and play football on Sunday. It's like it never happened. But the city of St. Louis has got its foot up their ass. And maybe I'm wearing my red Coons Ford shirt here to support the St. Louis Cardinals and Fred Bird, Redbird, and my aching back from St. Louis. But wow, what a week for the league. You don't hear about the league getting kicked around in court much, and you don't really hear about owners flipping on owners and the Daniel Snyders. I mean, this is going to get much more murky, as Sally Jenkins wrote in the Post over the weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, full disclosure, I've been eyeball deep trying to figure out the Ravens issues and all of that. But you just said it. For me, what really stood out is when you have owners going up against owners, quite frankly. And, we can all recall how the latest, this most recent relocation, Jerry Jones and his role in that, and with Cranky and everything that happened and how that played out. And you thought the Raiders at one point were going to LA. You thought the Raiders might be going to St. You hear all these different combinations, and then it falls into place, right? In the way that Jerry and the movers and shakers, the legacy owners, so to speak, wanted to work out. So
St.
when
Louis
you have something like, yeah, exactly. And I can recall you and I talking to Howard Balzer at a couple different points over the last few years, and obviously him with his St. Louis roots and the feelings there and the betrayal there,
Can
and
you
the fact
imagine
that
what Bob Costas would say on the field that day?
Yeah, sure. No question. I mean, we talk about it here in Baltimore all these years later, and they've experienced that twice now. I mean, Oakland has experienced that twice now, although Raiders fans are a different breed in terms of how they view their team moving around. That's something I'll never understand, Ness. But
that's
it is
such just the nature of the league, though. And I think that that's something that if I were to interject and go, I mean, I don't want to take us in a completely different direction. That's something I don't feel with the Ravens. I don't feel like the Ravens are Baltimore's team. They're a purple team that's one of 32, that's a coat of arms that are the Ravens. And that's changed in sports. I mean, the Cowboys are the Cowboys. They're not Dallas's team. You know, I mean, the Patriots had cheering going on in LA. The Cowboys had problems the Vikings had problems in their own stadium with Cowboy fans, cheering at the end. So these teams are all transportable now. They're not cool little civic, not even the Packers. The Packers aren't Green Bays. They're anybody that wants to wear Green Bay colors. And you can even buy and give them some free money apparently now. They're going to do another little cattle call on fake money. The stuff they're into, dude, and this Daniel Snyder thing and the emails and screwing St. Louis, it's greasy. It's just really, really greasier like than I've thought about it over 30 years where it's been rah, 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 shish, boom, bah. I love you, Art. I love you, Steve. I go to owners' meetings. These people are sleazy people.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't disagree with you on that. And I think you just mentioned it. I mean, these are 32 entities. I think the markets and the cities themselves don't view it that way. I think Baltimoreans and people from this general area, whether you're in Baltimore, whether you live in southern Pennsylvania and you're from Baltimore, whether you're somewhere living on the West Coast, but you have Baltimore roots, view the Ravens as Baltimore's, but the league doesn't. And I mean, I think Baltimoreans would say, well, that's evident considering Robert Irsay left in the middle of the night with the Colts, and with him went a nickname, a tradition, colors, uniforms, all of that, which, to this day, and we talked about this even a few weeks ago, as much as the sizzle of the Colts coming back to Baltimore isn't there nearly to the degree it was even 10, 15 years ago, there's still that hurt, I think, whenever the Colts trot out throwback uniforms, for example, like they are this year, and advertising and branding with Johnny Unitas and Lenny Moore and individuals who never had any association or interest with having an association with Indianapolis. So I think people here in Baltimore are well aware of that, but it is dirty. And I mean,
I was in St. Louis where it hurt my back, 5 weeks ago when Tucker made the kick in Detroit, and I'm sitting in the Budweiser bar that's about to become a casino, that's across the street from the stadium, that is all St. Louis Cardinal baseballed up. They had won like 17 games in a row at that point. I mean, and in a baseball city. And the reason the football stadium's empty for Mick Jagger to be there for a week to rehearse for the tour was because they lost their football team. And I walked into the dome and I thought, doesn't look any different than Detroit's dome or Indianapolis's dome or anybody else's dome, that they could roll a bar over there and they could have premium this and leather seats over there and cheerleaders there and playmakers there and fireworks. Like, they won a Super Bowl there, man. I was in that building when they won the NFC Championship game. I was there when they beat Tampa. I'll never forget it. I walked out of that building to go to the subway. I had a flight to catch home that night. I was going to the Super Bowl in Atlanta. It was a short turnaround week, if you remember. It was the only year there wasn't a bye. It's 22 years ago now. But I know I said this earlier, for those listening to Luke and I, we talked earlier about the bye weekend, that I made Super Bowl plans. And this is not unique for me, dude. This is my 28th Super Bowl if I do it. I missed last year. It's unique that I don't go. I got a flight. You don't have a flight yet, but I don't know, whether you're going to go, we're going to go, I'm going to go, what we're going to do. I didn't have a room until this weekend. And I book all this, and I start to have the sugar plums of Lamar being there and what it would look like if the Ravens come and who would go and how would they get there and how would the digital tickets, like all of that. So I thought it through a little bit, and I thought, well, the bus trip to Buffalo would be fun for a playoff game. Like, we missed out on that last year. Like, if we could do that kind of thing that would be fun. So I start to think and dream a little bit. But, dude, I really did think about you and me plying our wares, staying at the downtown Westin 6 blocks away for $285 a night and walking down. And I said to my wife, there's going to be a lot of celebrities there. If there's no masks, if we're post-pandemic, and that's still, for all of us to figure out where my wife and I are getting the third shot this week, right? But I thought when we sit down in LA, bro, you and me for a week, there'll be a team there and another team. Tom Brady will be there. And there'll be a Super Bowl. But behind that backdrop, look at our stadium and look at our LA headquarters and look at where we're going to do the draft and where we're going to do Super Bowls and where the Chargers are going to move to London because that's what they're effing going to do and everybody knows it, right? Like that team's for rent. Jacksonville's they have teams now for it. Luke, I almost wanted to burst in on you when you were waxing about teams and the league doesn't view it that Baltimore is the Ravens. How about this Tampa Montreal thing? Now they're going to have a team that, I watched them do that in San Juan, right? I watched Oakland flirt with Las Vegas. I saw the Washington Nationals printed on 1974 baseball cards with Nate Colbert and Randy Jones and Dave Winfield, right? So I mean, teams move, stuff happens. I watch it happen, but then the aftermath of this is different now, where municipalities aren't giving free love. We're in the middle of this, and no one will admit it. And despite what Don Moeller or what Jeff Barker or anybody will tell you, the Orioles are in peril. Until they get another owner, they have a better franchise, they have business community roots, people want to sponsor them, people want to start coming back to the game, and they establish themselves as something against the Nationals and what the Nationals have become, that these franchises, the amount of money, the amount of corporate money, the amount of interest, the amount of people going to games. I mean, like Philadelphia. I'll give you an example this weekend. Trotz is playing up there in a couple weeks. I haven't seen Barry. And I was going to go to an Islanders-Flyers game. I went on just to see. It's $25 to sit in the upper deck at a Flyers game. It's not like, tickets are readily available and, people are still, I guess, don't go out as much. The world's different. And these franchises are all different now, fundamentally because of the plague and how they've been run and the change in the world and what we do and how we're doing things after this. But for the league to be encumbered by this salacious, Me Too, awful, ownership-driven scumbag in D.C., team's terrible, nobody goes, allegations, hints, lies, cover-ups, Goodell, Pash, Allen, Gruden, boom, 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 down the line, Congress now. And now we're going to have a Super Bowl in LA where Stan Kroenke walked into all of the owners, walked in front. I mean, I've been at these things it's amazing because these guys all sort of walk around and they're all like some on their phones and some are in wheelchairs in the Tom Benson cases and, the old school people that were involved. And now there's this where Stan Kroenke walked into all of them with Jerry, went against all of the things that they said they were going to do in Carson and building a new stadium and having the Raiders move to LA and the Raiders and the Chargers would be LA's team and Stan figure it out in St. Louis or move them to London or, do whatever you want to do. And Kroenke's from Missouri, man. Like, this is Bisciotti moving the Ravens to the Bahamas because he likes it better, which he does. But I would say for Kroenke to walk in and say to his partners, after saying, I'm moving it, I'm building it, it's my land, it's my money, y'all can drink on it, we'll give the Chargers $1 rent. I pointed that out to my wife when she was watching the Patriots. They're paying $1 rent. They're paying $1 in LA. And then they're waiting for the next honeycomb that'll make the franchise worth $5 billion in London or Frankfurt, because that's what they're doing. And then they'll have to give St. Louis a team, right, because of this. But Kroenke walks into his partners, says a few words, walks out of the room, and then this lawyer stands up and says, by the way, you're all in this. Stan's decided he's going to sue all of you if he gets sued. So the $1 billion, maybe the treble $4 billion that we're going to build the new school system in St. Louis or whatever we're going to build with the money that we're going to have to give them for screwing them. or another team that they might not even want. Like literally, they might not even want a team at this point. Um, it, Dude, that's what we're going to be talking about in LA if we get there. I mean, God bless Lamar and Tom Brady or Josh Allen and pick your, whoever.
Mhm.
Kirk. It ain't going to be Kirk Cousins based on what I saw Sunday night. That's going to be chunky sitting in the middle of LA down by the Staples Center with people around the league as to how the hell this in a place that doesn't even like football, that didn't even really care. They got two teams. And how screwed up that is and what an awful temporary, because it's always temporary. The Jacksonville Jaguars are temporary. That's a mistake. It's like the Seattle Kraken. I don't know if it's a mistake or not, but I know the pilots were.
Yeah, well, I mean, you said temporary. I mean, that's what came to mind for me. It feels like these franchises and these stadiums, and this has always been true, but and maybe it's just our media climate with much more. There's much more discussion via social media and more outlets and everything, but an expiration date. I mean, that's really what comes to mind for any team in any city at this point. And look, that doesn't mean we're going to have mass relocation and 20 years from now, half the teams in the league right now are going to be playing somewhere else. But it feels more and more plausible that there's going to be more frequent relocation. Although at the same time, I mean, you just kind of said it. You talk about these publicly funded stadia where all it takes is one, and that's kind of how it always comes down to, and that's something that's been talked about a lot with Tampa Bay, with the Rays specifically, with the Oakland A's. Where are the viable markets? Where are these places that are going to write a blank check, especially in this pandemic latter stage, post-pandemic era that we're kind of entering now, that you wonder, but at the same time, it takes one market. And before you know it, then you have chaos and you have, as we saw a few years ago,
you think Major League
multiple teams.
Baseball wouldn't want a team in Nashville, and that's the leverage that Baltimore uses to get Angelos a team in Nashville and Kevin Plank, it won't be Kevin Plank, but like
Right.
that, a team in Baltimore, that there would be another Orioles, that you're like, that's how this stuff spawns. Like, and it is based on demand and need. And the fact that we'd be sitting in LA with this Chargers team where there's no demand and no need, and San Diego just basically said, F you, we're never going to have a team. And places like St. Louis that have been brushed aside might just prefer the $3 billion and stick it up their ass, because there's no lawyer. The real story about the owners' meetings last week, Luke, was this. And then they know this, right? And Steve's not there. Dick's in the room for Steve, which is really unusual because every Dan Snyder, every Jerry Jones, the people the faces of the league, the Haslams, they're in the room.
Mm-hmm.
That the lawyers for the league would get up and say, fellas, we're getting our ass kicked in St. Louis, and we're either going to have to give them a team or we're going to have to give them a whole lot of money because Stan broke the law. And they're coming hard, and we're losing, and we're going to lose. And our lawyers are telling us we can hang on and we can play, but we're going to lose. Now, what are we going to do? And then they said, well, who's going to pay for it? And Stan Kroenke pointed to them.
All of you, right?
And if you don't think that that's effing World War, and by the way, every owner's already in on this for millions, and in some cases, 10 million. It was said as 8 figures.
Mm-hmm.
That some of the legal counsel is getting up on $100 million now in this situation. So there really is, and it's just money. It's just money, and these guys have plenty of that. And none of them like to lose, and none of them roll on each other. It's the whole Jeffrey Epstein secret society. They won't roll about groin rubs in Florida. They don't roll on covert activity at rest stops for the Cleveland franchise. They don't roll on each other. And it was fascinating in the NBA how quickly they rolled on that guy out in LA, and how quickly Jerry Richardson got rolled over as an old man who played in the league He is the reason the Carolina Panthers they exist. The whole concept of them was him, and they moved his ass out the door because he didn't want anything for all the terrible things he must have done to be, hey, I'm out, dude. Just get me
Right.
out of here. The Matt Lauer, just I'm out. No more interviews. And Dan Snyder is still taking pictures in Redskins gear and parading around, and his wife allegedly is the stockholder. And then I watched the programming over the weekend. They put Jimmy Haslam on TV 3 times and his wife and a managing partner in the middle of one game. I haven't seen Dan Rooney since I was having dinner with him with Mike Tomlin 3 years ago at the owners' meetings at the Biltmore. I mean, they're doing damage control. They're doing cover up. They're telling ESPN they can't talk about it. They're telling Fox they can't talk, and Fox will do whatever. Fox will do whatever you pay them to do. Whatever the Koch brothers say, they do. I mean, you already know. I mean, what Fox is about. I mean, it's trash. But reporting truth for this happened for real in the league last week. And when we get to the Super Bowl, there's going to be a game, but there is a real fire brewing behind closed doors in the league right now. And that sort of goes above and beyond in a lot of ways, because this is how teams wind up in London and St. Louis. I mean, the post-pandemic thing for the NFL is owners fighting with each other in court and Congress coming after their emails and John Gruden saying, you could fire me, but I'm getting my $60 million because this isn't going to fly, and I'm going to get lawyers, and we're going to do discovery. And no one wants discovery in the National Football League. None of them.
Yeah, I would venture to say most big business doesn't want discovery. I mean, where you're talking about billionaires, I think that's something that's probably not unique. Not probably, definitely isn't unique to the NFL. And that's not to be clear, not saying that makes it okay. But I want to go back to something you mentioned. I mean, Jerry Richardson, which, I mean, we remember the allegations that became public, and he's sells the team, he goes away. I mean, he's 88 in his 80s at that point. But it is remarkable to me that reaction, that swift action, is taken where he's pushed out of the fraternity very quickly. And you mentioned when that's happened in the NBA with the Clippers, but all of this with Daniel Snyder, and when I say all of it, still plenty that we don't know, that hasn't been made public, as far as, I mean, corruption and sexual harassment. I mean, the whole gambit of things that's been talked about, even if all details haven't come to light. It is remarkable, though, that Daniel Snyder is, and I know Goodell talked about this, and they talked about discipline and how he hasn't, been in charge there, and I use that in quotes recently. But it is remarkable to kind of look at the Jerry Richardson situation compared to what's happening with Washington and Daniel Snyder, and the league just kind of looks, I don't know, dare I say, look the other way on it. I mean, it's just, it really is off-putting in that way. And look, I mean, ultimately most fans aren't interested in the business part of it. They just aren't. And I, it's leisure activity for the average working man. So I understand that. I'm not being disparaging saying that, but
when John Gruden pops up getting fired in the second quarter of a football game, you and I are saying that, right?
And you're wondering what happened, right? So, and look, I mean, that whole, that whole discussion as far as, the people that want the entire collection of emails released and all of that. I mean, look, I'm not opposed to that. I'm not going to sit here and try to speculate, who's going to be, who's going to be indicted with something that looks terrible and who isn't. I don't know. I don't know these guys personally. I mean, I don't know Steve Bisciotti that well. I've said hello. I've shaken his hand. I've listened to him at various press conferences, but it's not as though I've broken bread with him or I really know who he is as a person. So I'm not going to sit here and try to speculate on, which owner is really bad, which owner's just bad, and which owners are okay. I have no idea, but it really is something to kind of see what's happened with the Washington football team and what's come to light. And the entire,
how many people we know that used to go to their games, support them, around them.
I know people who work there, right? I mean,
many. I knew only women who worked there. I don't know many men. I mean, Marvin, Jack, coaches, but I didn't know men in the front office. But I knew 5 or 6 different females from the Ravens, the Capitals, the Wizards, before that, the Bullets, who wound up working in sales, promotions. I knew a cheerleader. I knew video people, social media people, and uh, none of them are talking. All of them are sort of gone. And I'm assuming when you start to hear 30 and 40 women swept up in this that have talked on the record and lawsuits, since like they're not going to, their lawyer's not going to take this. And and certainly Andrew Brandt last week and the people who said, I'm not going to not report on what's going on here when Congress is involved. And if ESPN and Fox and the NFL Network and Ravens.com and Jets.com, if they're never going to report on it, somebody should be reporting on this. And that's where the Baltimore Banners and the Washington Post and the Baltimore Positives and it should be talked about, because this is really, maybe this is one of the reasons Bisciotti wants nothing to do with these people, because he doesn't come around these owners' meetings and stuff. He's one of the very, very few owners that over the last decade is way less involved publicly, physically, in front of it, on TV, at press conferences, at chicken dinners. I mean, he doesn't pop up anymore. And where his expiration date is, and the next Mr. Big that's going to wear the purple sweater and make the decisions out there, it's not going to be Steve Bisciotti for a lot longer here. And this is the kind of stuff that makes a billionaire say, dude, had a good time, tripled my money, had fun, met celebrities, bought a bigger boat, but I'm done. Find another Mr. Big, I'm done. And when Congress is coming in, checking your emails, and this clear scumbag is 38 miles away, who you've known as a scumbag since the minute you came in the club, and you walk in and you're like, I got to be in the room with that guy, fumigate that lizard, that toad. You know what I mean? So there is a little bit of that, but there's also, I'll kick his ass on the field. But behind closed doors, they've never liked Al Davis. The owners hate Peter Angelos. Even eating pudding, they hate him. And they always hated him, and they never wanted anything to do with him. And that's part of the reason we haven't had an all-star game, and we don't get breaks and stuff that he does, like screwing the football team on the Keith Urban night. Those things amongst owners and amongst billionaires, it's everything in the world, or it's nothing at all if you've been a mensch, you've been a good human. And there's a lot of bad humans in that club. And Steve's not around it much and doesn't influence it much in the way that maybe one point he wanted to influence it. But then you don't get a call, and then they're deflating footballs. And then there's thoughts that they're videotaping or listening to you in a locker room in New England, and you call headquarters, and now they're going to bet on this stuff. Somebody bet on that Bengals game yesterday when the kid lowered his shoulder and lost money on that. Let alone that the Bengals lost. So the league, I remember when they were trying to adjudicate Ray Rice, and the Ravens are trying to hide Ray Rice, and then Ozzie Newsome's trying not to lie and say, I knew he punched her in the face, but not say that, and no speaky. And dude, when Congress comes, that's when Rafael Palmeiro wags his finger and no speaky, and I'm not going to pee in the bottle. But when they got 650,000 emails and there's billionaires involved, and somebody at Congress wants to get a badge and say, I unearthed this scandalous behavior amongst these billionaires. This is sticky, dude. This isn't, ESPN can sweep it away and tell Adam he's not allowed to talk about it. And Rich Eisen, be a good boy, do your podcast, make your $6 million a year. They're all in on it. You know, I heard Jim Nantz talking about what a great family the Haslams were. And I'm thinking, Jim makes $12 million a year. So Jim will read whatever they hand him at this point. And that's That's across the board. And I've seen that through the scumbag run in the country the last 5 years. And the knee and Colin Kaepernick and blackballing and who said what, and whose lawyer is going to say what, and who got paid off. And now we've got these emails, we got Congress, we got owners that hate each other that are rolling on each other, which is how Gruden got fired anyway, right? Gruden got fired. It was a hit on Mark Davis through Bruce Allen via someone in the Washington. That's what happened. Let's call it that. That's what ESPN's not reporting. That was an internal hit on Mark Davis because he made too much money after they effed him in LA when he played right. So, like, they all hate each other. And Steve's not involved, but Steve's involved. And the Ravens are involved. And it's what we'll be talking about in LA. It really will be. You know that.
It's what we will. Fans won't be, though. That's part. And the fans aren't the problem. Let's be clear. It's all too big to fail, though. That's the problem. The machine. We're talking about spokes in the wheel. You know,
See, that's what Dan Snyder
will
keeps
continue.
Thinking. My stadium's empty. I'm a scumbag. We'll win and they'll come back. I'll change things. I'll put my wife in front of it. I'll put a new logo in front of it. I'll look over there. There's John Gruden. He's a scumbag. See over there? Right. Hocus pocus. And that's the Trump game, right? Look over there. Look at the migrants are coming again. There's a caravan. The killer bees are coming. So yeah, that's what they tried to do last week, and that's what bye week is. But I'm telling you, it isn't. In St. Louis, it's not going that way, and in LA, it's not going that way. And they roll the Chargers out every week, and they roll the Jacksonville out every week. And certainly, dude, the Washington team doesn't have a name. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And they can't kick this guy out of the club. Why don't they just kick him out of the club and get sued by him? That probably that would be easier than doing what they're doing right now, which is sacrificing themselves.
Well, and that's what's so remarkable to me. I mean, going back to the Jerry Richardson point, I mean, and look, I'm not trying to excuse anything with that, but you look at how that played out, and yet there's just this reluctance / outright refusal to completely, to get rid of Daniel Snyder, right? I mean, you just flat out say this is over. And we know how this has worked. I mean, we've seen this in multiple leagues now where
give me the keys.
If the ownership wants someone out of the club, it will happen. Now, it might not happen the next day, but it will happen, and it will happen sooner than later. And to your point, you deal with it then from the standpoint of, he'll sue us, but this is a multi-billion-dollar operation, and television contracts continue to allow them to print money. Publicly funded stadium allow them to continue to print money. And they know that, all right, even if one market gets the what's of it, and the team leaves and they say, all right, we're done, there will always be another one. And
dude, Peter Angelos hasn't blinked his eyes in 6 years, and they're suing all of their partners. It's unheard of in the history of Major League. That's a thing I cannot express to people.
Yeah.
Peter Angelos is actively suing and has been for 13 years now.
Right.
All of his partners to screw all of them out of money, to take gate revenue from all of them, to take television revenue from all of them. And they hate him, and he's dying and eating pudding, and his kids running around in cowboy boots, and TJ Brightman's over there with a team that lost 100. How many? 7?
A lot.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know the number. That's how big. I think it's 100. I didn't want to get it wrong. That's why I asked you. So, and there's no bottom. Now you'll say the bottom is, well, they got Rutsch. All right. Blah, 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 blah. There's no bottom to them becoming a Baltimore civic business, fly, Cal Ripken, Camden Yards, 3.6 million people want to come, that all, and then the city has this, hey man, that's what I do that all day here. But the issue for me is when the Angelos thing for them, Bud Selig would have been better off to say to Peter, F you, and you're going to sue me, and we're going to take the money, and you're going to come get it. And in the end, we're going to throw you out of the club and pay you out and just get rid of your ass. And instead, they did it the exact opposite way. And you know what happened? They just get sued for 15 years anyway. He was going to sue them anyway. So that's having witnessed this now for, it'll be 30 years on December 13th that I've been talking about. Well, it's only been 28 and a half about Angelos. And the first year and a half, we thought he was like a good thing, which is amazing. I should go break those tapes out of me kissing his ass back in 93. And I guess because they have to exist because he was the Greek son of Highlandtown who was going to save everything. Like literally.
Local ownership. I mean, you're talking about with Cranky, local ownership. Like that's considered to be the golden goose, right? In any sport, you want local ownership.
And we see how awful it's been on the front curb with the Orioles. I mean, just the decimation right on down to effing the Ravens when they win a Super Bowl out of like having a Thursday night game. So just moving a game to lunchtime and making it a thing in the parking lot. Even that was one of his last acts before giving Chris Davis 160. It's amazing. And there'll be no resurrection of that. There can only be whatever the next thing is. And for these owners to think that, and in the end, Daniel Snyder's not going to be over there. And in order for the Washington football market and whatever the next stadium's going to be and whatever they're going to do there, because they're not going to move the franchise out of DC, they need something else. And if they were smart back in 2005 with Angelos, they would have been plotting to get him the hell out of the club because they saw in 1994 that they didn't want him in the club. And at some point when they don't want you in the club anymore, the Jerry Richardson thing, I think maybe he didn't want to be in the – I mean, I think he didn't want the dirt. I think it was a way for him to say, I'm at the end. I don't want my legacy tarnished. Angelos never saw the end. He never thought he would – he was never going to sell the team, which just was never. And Dan Snyder thinks that way as well. So they've got a different dug in partner here. But this Snyder thing, now that Congress is involved, I guess my point is the time to get him out would have been the last 2 years where the name change happened and say, you chase us for the $3 billion you want for the team, but we're going to fix the team and put another face on it and put another coat of paint on it. Because we need to do that. That's the best long-term strategy, is to fight with you instead of having you embarrass all of us. And the Angelos thing, in retrospect, if Bud Selig were to really give the test, he would say, you know what? I should have put the team there and just pissed Peter off and had Peter put us in court, and there would have been an end, and the end would have been something, but there would have been an end. And instead of this where there's no end, because that's an untenable, we've all been in bad relationships. The end is the quicker you can make the end of a bad relationship. And for the league right now, this is just, it's mind boggling to me that they haven't cut their losses for lack of a better expression,
Yeah. But as I said, I mean, however it's resolved and however many individuals may go down in the process, I always go back to Mark Cuban, probably close to a decade ago now, where he's, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Talked about it in those terms with the league, but I don't know, man. As much as we talk about these things, and look, I'm not trying to be dismissive of it, but look at the ratings. I mean, people are watching it more than ever. And as much as we're finding virtually every other sport is now becoming either a regional sport like baseball or it's niche. It's tennis has a cult-like following, but it's very niche, right? I mean, it's a specific, smaller subset of people. There are very few
people
things.
Don't watch tennis because they want to gamble on it in our country, but around the world they do, right? And in India and in cricket and like all of these places, and America's kind of last to catch up in that.
Yeah.
And now you sit and watch baseball and Big Poppy's opening a thing of cat. I mean, it's it's weird. I mean, like it really is. And that's going to be the next thing for basketball, for hockey, for all of these sports. Baseball, certainly, but football always had the gambling part of this.
Yeah,
and
sure.
that ties into it in a way that's what makes it what it is. People gamble on it. Really.
Yeah. No question. And I mean, fantasy football over the last 20 years has, and of course you can tie that in with gambling. It's very, they hold hands there, so to speak. But yeah, it's wild. It's funny. I was actually seeing, not to change the subject too much, but as you mentioned it, everyone's talked about baseball and, the slower pace and 4-hour games and all these pitching changes and everything. But someone made the point that doesn't that lend itself perfectly to a gambling experience? Not just wagering before the game and looking at the starting pitchers, but it really is a case of, all right, from this point on, pitching change. Hey, it's a time to place a prop bet now. What's the number, what's bet on the number of runs scored from that point to the end of the game. It is wild. And as someone who loves fantasy football, but is not into sports betting, it's wild to see what it's becoming. But it is.
It's not why you love it. It's not why I love it, right. But they're trying to get people to love it because of that. And I don't.
Well, you're always about casting a wider net, though. That's always, why do you think you see so many different uniforms and, different night, giveaways and all that? That's always been what it's about. Plenty of people that'll go to a baseball game to get a bobblehead, but if it's just to see the great young pitcher that's in Kansas City, just throwing out an example, that's not going to appeal to as many people necessarily, or the same people, let's say. So it's all about casting a wider net. That's why the streaming issue with baseball has driven me nuts over the last decade. Not seeing where we're going as a consumer, as a nation, as consumers. It drives me crazy. But it's interesting you mentioned, as far as the whole gambling thing. Now you can find money lines, over, under. You can bet on anything about any game now. But as I think about being a kid, the only place that was really prevalent to see a spread is the NFL. Yeah. How long have we talked about it? Even guys like you and me who I'm not involved in sports betting whatsoever. I have some friends who talk about it. It's interesting to hear about certain things you can do here and there and parlays and things like that.
I never knew anybody in my life that bet on baseball. I've done sports radio for 30 years here and nationally. I've been to Vegas, and some people, I always thought people that bet on baseball had a problem. I thought, man, starting pitching, whatever. Okay. I've watched people do it, but it's not like betting on horse racing or the things that I've seen in Vegas, active. And I've been all over the world. I've seen people betting on cricket and really into it, but I would say for this culture, it is shocking to see the baseball part of it, because I've been in deep baseball conversations with lots and lots of people. Once in a while I'd hear somebody say, I bet on Messina the other night or whatever. Fine. Mm-hmm. But it was never even and it wasn't under the table, talking about weed or talking about vice. It was just nobody talked about baseball in those terms. And to think that all of a sudden we're going to start, I'm not even interested, dude. I've tried to watch it every night. They played a 4.5-hour game the other night. The shifts, the players, the pregame show's terrible. It's just not. I don't know. It's on every night. I'm watching it. It'll be on the next couple. I hope it goes 7 games. I hope it goes 8 games. I hope Houston doesn't win. I hope Atlanta doesn't win. But I hope Houston doesn't win more. I don't know, man. It hasn't, and I know the ratings are down. It hasn't been very good in that way for me.
Well, but this goes back to what I said. Baseball has just become a much more regional sport, and I think it always has been. But I think as we have, look at how many sports, but also look how much TV is out there to consume. It used to be 30 years ago, you had your broadcast networks, and there were a handful of shows here and there on cable, right? In terms of original programming, now you have I mean, you have the networks, with their streaming service that all has additional shows and content. You have cable networks, with their streaming services with additional content. You have all the, the movie channels, HBO and Showtime and all, they have their original programming. You have anything under the moon in sports now you can watch, including European soccer that is so readily. I mean, there's just so much. So it really is a matter of what do you do to capture a big enough piece of the audience. And I think these other sports, and again, not speaking as any kind of a betting expert, because I'm not into sports gambling, but they have, all these other sports have to see what the NFL's culture has been in that regard. And you just said it, maybe 30 years ago, you didn't hear many people talking about betting baseball other than the occasional Mike Messina start. And that's fine. And I agree with that point. But you definitely knew people 30 years ago who were betting on football. And you knew 30 years ago, even though you never placed a bet, that the home team gets 3 points, right? I mean, that's just been mainstream common knowledge, even if you're someone who's not into gambling yourself. So if you're these other sports.
There was never any problem on this radio show or this station before the Ravens existed, after talking point spreads on Friday football frenzies. I'll take the Texans +6.
It was just part of right.
We'll make our picks on Friday. We used to do that. I don't do that. I mean, I haven't done that in 20 years, but we used to do that every week. And the spread was all, the little pool cards that came home from the point with my dad.
Right. But that was always part of it. And now these other sports, as I talked about, where, I mean, there's just it's an ocean of trying to, of content that's out there, sports or non-sports, and you're trying to cast as wide a net as possible to get more people interested in your product, more people, more eyeballs. And they look at what the NFL has done with that, even as Roger Goodell and before that Paul Tagliabue publicly saying, we have no interest being involved in sports gambling. I mean, Roger Goodell was saying this as recently as 5 years ago. And now to see what it's become, and believe me, I'm not making any moral comment on that. I'm just saying that that's how. I mean, that's their. Hey,
look, that was their position. Down the street here next month. I mean, we're gonna. Right. I talk to John Martin about it all the time. I mean, and there is big industry in on this, but it's new to us, right? Sure. I mean, in that way.
And again, I mean, it's just every other commercial. I mean, it is, you are inundated with it now, as opposed to before. It was. You saw the point spread for week 8 in the National Football League. You saw that in the newspaper, right? I mean, you saw that. And that's been there for a long time. I saw a thing
last week where you could bet on the coach that's going to get fired first.
Oh, absolutely.
Thought, there's some insider information there, whether it's Matt Nagy or the guy in Philadelphia, Sirianni. Piano knows some of these guys' names before they get fired.
I mean, you and I both know, I mean, individuals that we see at Radio Row at the Super Bowl that, I mean, send out, weekly emails on, not just the point spreads for the week, but as you mentioned, I mean, MVP odds and all kinds of different stuff. I mean, you can literally bet on virtually, I mean, there are so many details within a game that you can bet on now that it will blow you away. I mean, I've talked about this with my brother-in-law, and, he's not a gambling addict or anything like that, but he likes to play some bets every now and then. Do a parlay with the NFL, what have you. But I've asked him before, things that you can bet on it, and he's brought up, basically it's like a laundry list of items that you can bet on within a game, as far as score at the end of a quarter or who scores a touchdown first.
Because I like football.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
You know what I mean? Well, I like watching the game, and I don't need a fantasy team. I'm a Ravens fan. They lost 2 weeks ago. I mean, I'm on a slump.
Well, but I'd say you are as it relates to fantasy football, you are the exception. I mean, my mom has played fantasy football for a decade now. I mean, that's where we are at. And look, the more eyeballs you can draw to your product, the more money you're going to make. The more money you can
I wonder
print,
why
essentially.
your mom liked your football segment so much on the show.
Of course, of course. All right, good. I mean, I just have to tell her every year not to draft Justin Tucker too early. I mean, because kickers, you got to take in mind, you got to keep in mind positional value.
Hey, dude, we got to break. We got to talk some Ravens. Luke Jones is here. He'll be out in Owings Mills all week long. It's all brought to you by Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. We don't veer much off of the Orioles and Ravens road around here, but we're going to veer to the Crab Cake Tour this week. Silver Spring Mining Company in Perry Hall. Apologies to Gary Rissling and Councilman David Marks and Kevin Benson from Rosedale Federal and some other friends I had planned out last Friday. We're going to do it on Thursday, this Thursday, before the Vikings game. And then on Friday, we're back down in Fells Point. We're going to be at the Chop Tank, where here the fried chicken's delicious and the crab soup's delicious. Look forward to getting down there in Fells Point with the Atlas folks. Next week, Wednesday, we're at Fadley's in the morning. Crab cakes and mac and cheese. I'll be all up for that. Probably bring my wife home some from fresh fish too from the market there. And then next Friday, we are going to be with my friend Tommy Chigoris and our friends at Nick's Grandstand up in Timonium. It's all presented by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. Let yourself play. It is the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. He is Luke. I am Nestor. You can find us together at AM 1570 and at BaltimorePositive.com.